This is Radio Ecoshock with Alex Smith.
Water and society. So you can click on any one of those tabs and see, the latest discussion, news, essays in each of those areas. So we are looking at a global systemic crisis that has many dimensions to it. Energy, as I said earlier, is at the heart of it, but even the energy question has its economic and social and environmental implications. So being able to pick those things apart and put them back together is we think, really useful. There's also an interactive map there on the site that can take you to organizations in your vicinity that are doing the kind of work that we're helping to publicize and promote around the country, resilience building efforts, sustainability building efforts, like the transition towns, for example. We have all of the transition towns mapped, but also local food organizations and local energy co-ops and so on.
Well, that sounds really useful. This is Radio Ecoshock. I'm Alex Smith with energy author and lecturer Richard Heinberg. He's a senior fellow with the Post-Carbon Institute. We're talking about a massive new book called Energy, Overdevelopment, and the Delusion of Endless Growth, just published by PCI. Richard, I want to pose a kind of devil's advocate question, maybe a hard question. This big book of energy explains fossil fuels have powered the boom in human population as well. But at the same time, many of the arguments against some forms of energy, including solar or wind, in the book with the photos, seem to be based partly on aesthetics. The pipes and the windmills look bad. Doesn't that imply we might have to have a lot fewer people if we cut back on fossil fuels, in part to support these aesthetic principles of what nature should look like? Do you see what I'm getting at there?
Yeah, aesthetic sounds so ephemeral. It sounds so she and, like only rich people can afford nice views. So, worrying about how things look is really elitist. But, I think that's a very short-sighted way of looking at the situation. If we continue as we are now, basically all places of natural beauty are going to be impacted. There will be no beauty left. And is beauty all that important? Well, actually, I think it is. I think it's what feeds our soul. It's what makes life worth living. And if we are taking away the very things that make life worth living, if we're scrubbing the environment of all of those elements, then what kind of legacy is that? Is that really a sign of an intelligent species? So will we get to a point where we must reduce human population? Yeah, I think we're getting to that point. We're at 7.1 billion humans now and marching as rapidly as we can toward 9 or 10 billion. And we're already at the point where we have saturated the natural world with our impacts. If we're smart, one of the most important things we'll do over the course of the next few decades is take population seriously and take steps to limit human numbers.
Richard Heinberg, can people read the essays separately without buying the big book?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We will be publishing them online on resilience.org as time goes on. But if folks want to just read the essays, there's no better way than to buy the Energy Reader book, which is basically, it's all the verbal content of the big book. It doesn't have obviously all of the photographs, but it has all of the essays plus 2 or 3 extra essays. And the Energy Reader is really designed to be used as a resource for college and high school classes on energy and related subjects, and it is being picked up by, I don't have the latest figure, but dozens of sustainability classes and energy classes around the country.
I sure wish it had been there when I went to school. We didn't learn any of this. Let's be frank. I mean, if nuclear is too dangerous, and I think we can agree on that after Fukushima, and oil and gas will run out eventually, that's undeniable. Hydro has its risks. Do you see an energy source available to keep us going safely? And if not, what are we supposed to do?
We have many, many energy sources available, some obviously better than others, some renewable, some non-renewable. The problem is, of course, we're concentrating on the wrong energy sources. We should be using renewable energy to a much greater degree. But, when you really get to the nub of it, the problem is not the energy sources. The problem is overconsumption. We've gotten used to using so much energy that even if we get it all from renewable sources, there are very steep environmental costs to pay. With solar photovoltaic, for example, we're getting energy from the sun, but manufacturing and deploying solar panels on a massive scale has environmental impacts, whether it's from the resource depletion of manufacturing them or the changed landscapes of putting acres and acres of these things, thousands of acres ultimately. Either way, it's going to have an impact. So what we really need to do, the conversation we need to have is, yes, about energy sources, but also about how much energy do we really need to use in order to maintain acceptable levels of comfort and convenience? And that's a question so far that we've not been willing to discuss. The assumption is that we have to grow our economy. We have to have more and more people every year living the way Americans do, driving cars on highways and air conditioning their homes and so on. If we stay on that treadmill, it's going to be a very, very bleak future. The only way we're going to get off of that treadmill is to start talking about and thinking about, discussing how to use less.
Well, I'd like to start wrapping up because I want people to hear the speech that you gave at the Chicago Great Lakes Pioneers Conference. First of all, are there any websites that you'd like to give out for people to follow up? But secondly, I just want to ask you, what are you working on right now? Is there some interest that you have that you're developing that you can tell us about?
Well, sure. I am working on a new book right now, and it's called Snake Oil, and it's about the current drilling boom in North Dakota and also the shale gas boom. There's been a lot of discussion in the press recently about how this will make America energy independent, how we can look forward to 100 years of cheap natural gas, how the U.S. is new Saudi Arabia, and so on. We're doing some very thorough analytic work at Post Carbon Institute. We've purchased proprietary databases, so we have production data on 65,000 oil and gas wells. And in crunching the numbers, we're coming to very different conclusions. We're looking at decline rates of 60 to 80% in the first year of production for these unconventional oil and gas wells. It looks from where we're sitting like another pyramid scheme. It's another financial bubble like the housing bubble of the mid-2000s, and it's going to end similarly. So this is what I'm writing about. I'm hoping that the book will be out. Well, we're looking at a real fast track for this book, so hopefully by summer of 2013.
We've been talking with Richard Heinberg, one of the thought leaders behind A World Without Fossil Fuels. He's at the Post Carbon Institute and at richardheinberg.com, and he's in the new book, Energy Overdevelopment and the Delusion of Endless Growth. Richard, thank you for sharing your time with us, and I forgive you for sending me the biggest book I've ever owned.
Well, thank you, Alex. It's always a pleasure speaking with you.
I'm Alex Smith for Radio Ecoshock.
Check out the Radio Ecoshock website. We're at ecoshock.org.